The auction house on Verath Station smelled like recycled air and bad decisions. Marcus Vale sat in the third row with a scratched datapad and a coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He had not noticed because he was watching lot 7215 go to a Drell broker for 600 credits and running the numbers in his head on whether the coolant manifolds in that lot were worth the counterbid. They were not. He crossed it off his list. The room was big and gray, and full of beings who made their living buying other people's broken things. Drell with their long fingers and fast eyes. Verath clerks who moonlighted as floor traders on their lunch breaks. 2 Oresi salvagers in matching gray coats, who always bid together and never once spoke to anyone else. And maybe 30 humans scattered through the seats, like punctuation in a sentence nobody wanted to finish. Marcus was one of them. He had been doing this for 9 years, moving through auction houses on 6 different stations, buying broken things, fixing what could be fixed, stripping what could not, selling the difference. And he was good at it, the way a man gets good at something when there is simply no other option left available to him. His company, Vale Salvage and Recovery, had 4 employees including himself, 1 functional transport vessel, 1 transport vessel that was functional, in the optimistic sense of the word, only if you did not ask the port engine any difficult questions, and a debt column that had been growing for 3 quiet months, like mold behind a wall you had agreed with yourself not to look at. He needed coolant manifolds. He did not need anything else. The Verath clerk at the front, 4 arms, flat voice, the expression of a being who had been experiencing mild inconvenience, without any interruption, for 40 consecutive years, moved through the lots with the energy of a clock doing its job. Lot 7416, drive housing, Oresi make, moderate damage, sold. Lot 7417, cargo nets, 17 units, sold. Lot 7418, life support array, non-functional, parts only, sold. Marcus crossed items off his list, and did the math in his head. Get the manifolds in lot 7422. Pick up the secondary relay coils, if they go cheap. Go home, fix the Meridian's port engine. Take the Harwick contract. Survive another quarter. That was the plan. It was a good plan. Lot 7441 came up at 1:47 in the afternoon. The clerk read it the way he read everything. Flat, no drama. 4 arms moving through the display controls like he was sorting through old mail. Ardent Choir, human make, fracture era designation, class 7 salvage, 0 strategic value, material processing recommended, opening bid 12,000 credits. The display image came up on the main screen at the front of the room. Marcus stopped writing on his datapad. The ship in the image was big, not by modern standards, not by anything current, but big the way old things are big. The way things built by human hands with real intention behind them are big. A blunt prow that had clearly taken serious hits and kept moving. A silhouette that looked like someone had drawn it with a ruler, and then decided halfway through that rules were made by people who had never been in a war. She was battered. She was 200 years old. She looked exactly like the ship in his grandfather's books, the ones kept in a wooden box on the top shelf of the old man's study. The box that was not for touching, that got touched anyway, by a small boy who would climb the shelf in the early mornings while his grandfather slept and open the pages carefully and trace the ship drawings with one slow finger, careful as a prayer. 12,000, said the clerk. Do I have 12,000? Nobody moved. Of course nobody moved. It was a class 7, 0 strategic value, 2 centuries old. The file recommendation said material processing, which was the polite bureaucratic term for grinding a thing into raw component metals and selling the weight of it. Marcus's hand went up. He watched it happen like it belonged to someone else entirely. 14,000 from the floor. Do I have 15? Broker 2 rows back raised 1 finger. Not serious interest, just the reflex of an experienced auction goer who twitches sometimes at round numbers the way old dogs twitch in their sleep. 15. 16 from the floor. Do I have 17? Marcus did not look down at his datapad. He did not look at the numbers he had been running all morning. He looked at the ship on the screen and thought about nothing, which was the same as thinking about a wooden box and a top shelf and a careful finger, and a very old man who said, more than once, in the particular voice he kept for things that mattered, "That ship held the line, Marcus. That ship held the line when nothing else in that whole sky would." 18, 19 from the floor. Do I have 20? The Drell broker had stopped twitching. The room had the specific quiet of people watching someone make a mistake they have already committed to. 19,400, going once, going twice, sold. Marcus sat very still in his seat. The clerk moved immediately to lot 7,442 without any pause, a cargo loader with a snapped hydraulic arm, very reasonable opening bid. And the room settled back into its rhythm. And nobody looked at Marcus, except the Drell broker 2 rows back, HFY, who had completed 17 transactions with Vale Salvage over 4 years, and knew Marcus's operating numbers probably as well as Marcus did. HFY leaned carefully across the empty seat between them. "That ship is not repairable," he said, and his voice was not unkind about it. "You understand this, yes?" "I know," Marcus said. He was looking at the transaction confirmation on his datapad. 19,400 credits. His emergency operating reserve, gone. His financial buffer for the next 2 months, gone. His ability to make payroll without the Harwick contract, now a thin thread that required the Harwick contract to come through on time, and without complications, which it historically did not. He needed to call his engineer. He needed to call his accountant. He probably needed to call someone who could explain to him why his hand had gone up when it did, because he did not have a clean answer to that yet, and he was a man who preferred to have answers before he moved. He closed the transaction screen. He pulled up the impound registry for Verat Station and searched the berth listing for the Ardent Choir, Bay 7, Sublevel 9, Deep Storage, the level where ships went when the station had quietly decided they were done waiting for someone to care. He saved the location. Around him, the auction moved forward at its flat and efficient pace through the rest of the morning's wreckage. Lot 7,447, Thruster Assembly, partial, 2 units salvageable. Lot 7,448, Hull Plating, Keth make, good condition. Lot 7,449, Coolant Manifolds, set of 4, minimal wear. Marcus sat in his chair. He had forgotten to bid on the coolant manifolds. He stared at that fact for a long moment. Fine. Fine, fine, fine. Sub-level 9 of Verat Station impound was the kind of place the station did not put on any tourist maps, because tourists did not come to Verat Station, and also because sub-level 9 was where things went to be forgotten at a professional level. The corridor lights down there ran at 60% power, which was enough to see by and not enough to feel good about it. And the air recyclers were doing their job, but only barely. And the whole level had the feeling of a room where everyone had agreed a long time ago to stop trying. Marcus walked the long corridor to Bay 7, with a portable light in one hand, a scanner in the other, and a running list in his head of what he could strip and sell to claw back at least 8,000 credits of what he had spent. The math was not impossible. He did not need her to fly. He needed her to be worth something in parts, and old ships almost always were. Hull plating, drive components, life support arrays, even the wiring, if it was the right gauge. You could build a recovery out of the right kind of wreckage if you were patient and you knew what you were looking at. He knew what he was looking at. The airlock of Bay 7 was sealed with a standard impound lock, which opened on his new ownership credentials after 3 seconds of thinking about it, which was 2 seconds longer than it should have taken, and suggested the lock had not been asked to do anything in a long time. The outer airlock door opened, then the inner door. It should not have sealed. The ship had been sitting in unpowered storage for 40 years, and the seals on a vessel that old should have degraded past function. But it sealed, clean and tight, with a soft mechanical sound that was somehow more confident than it had any right to be. Marcus stepped aboard the Ardent Choir. She breathed old air at him, stale, flat, the specific staleness of a closed space that had been holding its breath for decades, but breathable, which was already more than he had planned for. Then the emergency lighting came on. not because he triggered it. Its own. Amber orange, warm, running the length of the main corridor in two long strips that lit up one after another from the airlock toward the interior. Like something showing him the way in, Marcus stood still for a moment. He looked at the lights. He walked forward. The Ardent Choir was not a large ship by the standards of the current era. She was a mid-class warship from a time before humans had access to the construction methods that made modern vessels possible, which meant she had been built the old way, which meant she had been built like the people building her did not fully trust anything they had not put in themselves. Every corridor he walked was wider than it needed to be. Every access panel he checked was labeled in 3 places instead of 1. Every junction had a manual override that a person could operate with their hands in the dark if the power was gone. And the override was recessed into the wall so it would not get hit by accident. And next to every override was a small diagram showing exactly what it did, stamped into the metal rather than printed on a label that could peel. Someone had thought about someone being alone and scared and not knowing what to do. Someone had built for that person specifically. Marcus moved through her deck by deck, with his scanner running and his list in his head. And item by item, the list started doing something unexpected. It started getting shorter. The hull plating, rated for strip and sell, came back on the scanner as 3 layers deep, where modern vessels ran 1. Which meant it was not standard gauge, which meant it could not be sold as standard stock, which meant it was only valuable on the Ardent Choir herself. The drive housing, which he had expected to be a dead loss, was intact. And not just intact but sealed. And the seals were a compound he did not recognize, which meant someone had either serviced this ship much more recently than the records showed, or the original builders had used materials the rest of the galaxy had not caught up to yet. He stood in the engine room for 4 minutes, reading his scanner and not saying anything. He walked to the bridge. The bridge was dark. The main consoles cold and cracked. The captain's display a black rectangle. 200 years of interface design that the galaxy had moved 6 generations past. And it smelled like dust and old metal and something underneath both of those things that Marcus did not have a name for. He looked at the captain's chair. On the armrest, someone had left a ceramic mug. White, human-made, the handle chipped on one side in a clean break that had happened a long time ago. It had been sitting there for 40 years. Marcus crossed the bridge and picked it up. He looked at it for a moment. He walked 3 steps to the navigation console and set it down there instead. Like changing its location was solving something. Like geography was the specific problem here. He turned back to his scanner. The readings from the ship's core systems section were not making sense, so he went down 2 decks to check in person. And what he found there was this: the Ardent Choir's Central Systems Network. Not an artificial intelligence, nothing that complex, just the integrated nerd system that connected all the ship's functions and let them talk to each other, was still running. Not fully running, a heartbeat. A single low-power signal cycling through the network on a loop that had been going for 200 years because someone had built the backup battery system to outlast everything else, because someone had decided that the last thing this ship should lose was its pulse. Marcus sat down on the floor of the engine room. The amber lights ran quiet above him. He looked at a crack in the deck plating near his left boot, a stress fracture that had been repaired, neatly, with a weld pattern he recognized as human work from the rhythm of it, the particular way human welders moved their tools when they were being careful, because they cared about what they were fixing. Someone had fixed this. Someone had been down here on this floor, with their tools and their light, fixing a crack in a deck plate, because the ship mattered to them, and a crack in the floor was not acceptable, even if no one would ever see it. Problem, Marcus thought. He called his engineer. Her name was Dara Osei, and she had worked for Vale Salvage for 6 years, and she answered on the second signal, with the voice of someone who had been expecting bad news, and was simply waiting to find out what kind. "I need you on Verith," Marcus said. "Sub-level 9, Base 7. Is this about the ship you bought at auction today? How do you know about that?" "Shekvar called me," she said. He was concerned. "I need a full structural assessment, and a systems evaluation." There was a pause. "Marcus," Dara said. Shekvar said you paid 19,000. 19,400. Another pause, longer. Is she worth it? Marcus looked at the crack in the deck plate. He looked at the weld someone had laid down with care, in this dark room, on this ship that the rest of the galaxy had filed under 0 strategic value and material processing recommended. I don't know yet, he said. He stayed on the floor of the engine room for another hour after the call ended, reading his scanner in the amber light, listening to the ardent choir breathe her slow, careful heartbeat into the dark. He did not think about the mug. He thought about it constantly. Word moved fast on Verith's station. It always did. The station was not large, the salvage community was not large, and the auction records were public filings, which meant that by the morning after the sale, the fact that a human contractor named Marcus Vale had purchased a Fracture-era human warship for 19,400 credits had traveled from the auction house records to the station's trading floor to 6 different message boards to the personal communicator of a historian named Dr. Yesenia Park on Callum Station, 3 systems away, who apparently had alerts set for exactly this kind of event. Marcus learned about the alerts when Dr. Park called him at 6:30 in the morning, weeping. He was drinking coffee and reading Dara's preliminary notes, and he almost did not answer. Mr. Vale, said Dr. Park, and her voice was doing several things at once, none of them fully under control. I need to confirm. You have purchased the Ardent Choir. You are currently in possession of the Ardent Choir. I am, Marcus said. There was a sound on the line that was not quite words. Are you all right? Marcus said. I have had an alert set for that ship's registry number for 11 years, Dr. Park said. 11 years, Mr. Vale. And this morning my communicator went off, and I thought it was a false positive. I thought the system had made an error. It didn't make an error. No, she said. No, it did not. And then she asked him 7 rapid questions about the ship's current condition, current location, system status, hull integrity, and whether the central network was showing any signs of activity. When Marcus answered yes to the last one, her voice did the not quite words thing again. He told her what Dara had found so far. He told her about the triple-layer hull and the unrecognized seal compound and the heartbeat in the system's core. Dr. Park was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Vale, she said, do you know what the Ardent Choir did at Vethera Station? She held the line. My grandfather talked about it. She held the line alone, Dr. Park said, for 11 hours, a single mid-class human vessel against a Keth Dominion suppression fleet, before coalition reinforcements reached the engagement zone. The engagement models at the time gave her a survival probability of less than 4%. She should not have been able to hold that line, Mr. Vale. The math did not support it, and she held it anyway. Marcus said nothing. The records were sealed, Dr. Park continued, and her voice had shifted. Quieter now, careful. The way people speak when they are saying something they have wanted to say for a long time and are not sure it will land. The Keth Dominion requested reclassification as part of the ceasefire negotiations. They were embarrassed. A pre-coalition human vessel had embarrassed them in open engagement, and they spent 40 years of diplomatic capital making sure that engagement disappeared from the official record. The ship went into impound, the files went into archive lock, and the galaxy moved on and forgot. Marcus set down his coffee. So she won, he said. She won, said Dr. Park. He sat with that for a moment. I'll be in touch, he said. He ended the call and looked at Dara's notes again, and the notes looked different now. The way things look different when you know what they were built to do. The station's scrap processing broker came to see him at 1100. His name was Foss, a Verath national, middle-aged, professional, the kind of man who dealt in the end of things without any drama about it. And he came with paperwork, which Marcus had expected, because there was apparently a standing processing order on Fracture-era human vessels that predated Foss's posting, and that Foss himself could not fully explain. It is a very old order, Foss said, sitting across from Marcus in the small impound office, with his hands flat on the table and his paperwork arranged neatly in front of him. It predates my posting by some years. I do not know the origin. I have simply always had it, and when a vessel matching the criteria comes into registered salvage status, the order activates. Who placed it? Marcus said. I do not have that information, Foss said. You have a standing order to destroy a class of vessel, and you don't know who told you to do it? Foss looked briefly uncomfortable. It is a very old order, he said again. Marcus thanked him, and showed him out. The Keth Dominion trade attaché arrived at 1400 in a pressed gray uniform that probably cost more than Marcus's transport ship, the functional one. And he sat down across the same table, with the precise, comfortable posture of someone who had never once in his professional life been told no, and expected today to be consistent with that record. His name was Attaché Varric Saul. He was polite. He was precise. He explained with great patience that the Ardent Choir represented a Category 3 legacy diplomatic sensitivity item under the terms of the Vethara ceasefire addendum, which Marcus had almost certainly never heard of, and that the recommended disposition of such items was controlled decommission, and that the Keth Dominion was prepared to offer Marcus a very reasonable acquisition price, scrap value plus a handling fee of 3,000 credits, which together would more than cover his purchase cost and leave him with a small profit and no further complications. He put a number on the table. It was a fair number. Marcus looked at it. He looked at Varric Saul. No, he said. Varric Saul paused, a short pause, the kind that happens when a very controlled person encounters something their preparation did not include. I don't think you fully appreciate the diplomatic complexity involved in. I understood everything you said, Marcus told him. The answer is no. Varric Saul gathered his materials. He left with the same precision he had arrived with, which was the most unsettling way he could have left, because it meant he was not finished, only pausing. That evening Marcus went back to Sub-Level 9. He walked the Ardent Choir's corridors again in the amber light. Slower this time. Not scanning, just walking. The way you walk through a place when you are trying to understand it, rather than inventory it. He went to the bridge. He picked up the mug from the navigation console where he had left it the day before. He thought about 11 hours. He thought about 4% survival probability. He thought about whoever had welded that crack in the engine room floor, because a crack in the floor was not acceptable. Not on this ship. Not when this ship had work to do. He set the mug back on the captain's armrest where he had found it. That was where it lived. He had moved it for no reason, and it belonged back where it was. He sat in the navigator's chair. Not the captain's. He was not ready for that. He was not sure what ready would even mean. And he sat in the amber quiet of a 200-year-old ship that had done something the math said was impossible, and had been buried for it. And he listened to her heartbeat, moving slow and steady through the dark. Varric Saul would come back. The processing order would not disappear on its own. These were not problems he could solve tonight. He sat with them anyway, in the way you sit with a thing when you have already made the decision, and you are just waiting for the rest of yourself to finish catching up to it. He was not going to sell her. He was not going to let them scrap her. He did not know yet what came after those two facts. He knew they were facts. Dara Osei arrived on Varath Station with 2 duffel bags, a portable diagnostic rig, and the expression of a woman who had already done the math and was here anyway. She walked the Ardent Choir for 6 hours on her first day without saying much. Marcus walked with her for the first 2 hours and then left her to it, because Dara did her best thinking without anyone standing next to her. And Marcus had spent those 2 hours watching her face move through something he recognized, the same thing his face had done, the slow shift from professional assessment to something quieter and harder to name. She came to find him in the impound office at the end of the day. She sat down. She put her notes on the table between them. She should not be this intact, Dara said. I know, Marcus replied. The hull compound on the inner layers is not in any current materials catalog. I sent samples to a testing lab on Callum Station, and they came back with a composition breakdown I have never seen. It is not stronger than modern alloy. It is just built differently, layered differently. Like whoever designed it was thinking about repeated stress over a very long time, rather than peak resistance in a single impact. What does that mean in practice? It means she was built to take hits and keep going and take more hits, Dara said. Not to survive one bad moment, but to survive a lot of bad moments in a row. She paused. The reactor is a problem. How bad? It is not bad in the way I expected. It is bad in the way of being extremely old and extremely inefficient by current standards. It burns through fuel at a rate that would make modern engineers physically uncomfortable. But the design is mechanically sound, and the core housing is in better shape than it has any right to be, and I think I can bring it to operational status. How long? Weeks. I need parts, some of which do not exist anymore in standard supply, which means I need to fabricate them or find them in old stock. And I need 2 more people minimum, and I need you to stop looking at the budget sheet while I'm talking, because I'm not done. Can see you doing it. Marcus put the budget sheet face down on the table. He had spent most of the previous night staring at it, and the night had not improved the numbers. He had also spent part of the night on a call with Dr. Park, who had provided him with a detailed technical archive on fracture-era human vessel construction that she had been compiling for 11 years, in case a moment exactly like this one ever arrived. And the archive had been useful, and Dr. Park had also mentioned carefully that the story of the Ardent Choir being purchased and potentially restored was moving through the human community faster than either of them had expected. People want to help, she had said. What kind of help? Financial, technical. There are engineers who want to work on her. There are historians who want to document the restoration. There are people who have been waiting a long time for something like this to be possible. Mr. Vale? And they would like to be part of it. Marcus had said he would think about it. He had not slept much after that. The help arrived before he finished thinking about it. A retired hull engineer named Sig Torrens showed up on Sublevel 9 on the 3rd day, with a bag of personal tools and a message from Dr. Park, and the information that he had worked on fracture-era vessel restoration as a young man, and there was not much he had not seen. He was in his 70s, and moved like a man who had spent 50 years in engine rooms, and felt most comfortable there, and was not planning to stop. He walked the Ardent Choir for 2 hours, and came back to the impound office, and told Marcus that the fabrication problem on 3 of the reactor components was solvable, if they could find the right raw stock, and that he knew where the right raw stock was, and that he was not charging for his time. Why? Marcus said. Sig looked at him with the patience of someone answering a question they find slightly baffling. Because she's the Ardent Choir, he said, as if that explained everything, and in the way he said it, it did. A 4th crew member arrived 2 days after that, a young Drell system specialist named Kethvar, who was not related to Shekvar, despite the name similarity, and who had heard about the project through the Verath trading community, and had a specific interest in old human interface systems, and asked only that Marcus let him document the ship's original network architecture as part of the work. Marcus said yes. They started. The work was loud and complicated and expensive and full of problems that announced themselves at the worst possible times. The secondary power coupling on Deck 3 was corroded in a way that required complete replacement, and the replacement required a bracket configuration that did not exist in any current parts catalog. So Sig fabricated it by hand over 2 days, bent over a work table in the cargo bay with his personal tools and a lamp. And the bracket he made was ugly, and it worked perfectly. The atmospheric system needed new filtration units. Those were straightforward, at least current standard units adapted to the old mounting points, with some creative spacer work from Dara. The main console wiring on the bridge was original, 200 years old, and Marcus spent 3 days lying on the bridge floor tracing circuits through the panels, while Kethvar mapped them and made careful appreciative sounds about the construction logic, which was dense and redundant, and built as though whoever designed it had assumed the person doing repairs might be working alone under pressure with limited tools. Which they had probably assumed because that had probably happened. It was the 23rd night of the project when the bridge woke up. Marcus was alone. The others had gone to station quarters hours ago, and he was running a late check on the console connections he had finished that afternoon, just making sure, the way you check a thing twice when it matters. He was not expecting anything. The main console lit up. Not the emergency strips, the main console, every panel, the captain's display, the full navigation array, all of it blooming on at once, in the particular blue-white of human interface design from 2 centuries ago, filling the dark bridge with light. Marcus stood up slowly from where he had been crouched behind the captain's chair. He looked at it. The systems ran their startup sequences, old ones, nothing like current boot protocols, methodical and deliberate, checking each function in order, the way a person checks a list when they want to be sure. And then everything settled, and the captain's display cleared, and a single line of text appeared on the screen in old human standard script. 2 words. Ready, Captain. Marcus read it. He read it again. He was not going to do anything embarrassing about it, because he was a salvage contractor and a practical person, and he was at work. He needed coffee. It was important that he find coffee immediately. That was the situation in front of him. The station commissary was closed at this hour, but there was a machine 2 corridors up on sub-level 8 that dispensed something that was coffee adjacent, and he was going to go and get some and come back and run a full systems diagnostic. He went and got the coffee. He came back. He sat in the captain's chair, the first time because the ship was awake now and someone should be in it. And he held the bad commissary coffee, and he looked at Ready Captain on the display in front of him. And he listened to the ardent choir running. Not a heartbeat anymore, but a full quiet hum. Every system connected, every function online. 200 years old and alive. He reached up and put the ceramic mug in the cabinet above the console, the one with the small magnetic latch. The one someone had installed so the mug would not float in zero gravity. Someone had put that latch there on purpose. Someone had planned for this mug to stay. He closed the cabinet. He started the diagnostic. Attaché Varick Sol filed the formal coalition complaint on a Tuesday. Marcus found out about it on Wednesday morning, when Dara knocked on the impound office door and came in with her datapad and the expression she wore when she had information that required him to sit down first. He sat down. The complaint was filed under the Vethera ceasefire addendum, Category 3 Legacy Sensitivity Provision, and it requested that the ardent choir be placed under coalition administrative hold, pending a formal disposition review, which was the legal version of stop what you are doing and wait while we decide what happens to your ship. There were 3 Keth Dominion vessels now in the outer approach zone of Varys Station. Not a military posture, technically. Diplomatic accompaniment, technically. 3 current-generation Keth hulls sitting in the dark outside a station where one restored 200-year-old human warship was preparing for her first test flight, technically. They filed the complaint yesterday, Dar said. The hold goes into effect in 72 hours if it goes uncontested. What does uncontested mean in practice? Marcus asked. It means we sit still and wait, and the coalition reviews the case for between 6 months and 3 years. And in the meantime the ardent choir stays in Bay 7. Marcus looked at the paperwork on his screen. He looked at it for a while. How is she running? He said. She is running clean, Dara said carefully. All primary systems nominal. The reactor is stable, atmospheric is good, drives are ready. Sig ran a full check last night and signed off. Kethvar, said Marcus. He is done. His documentation archive is complete. He said it was the most interesting 3 weeks of his professional career, and that he's available if we need him. Marcus nodded. He stood up. Get everyone together, he said. He told them in the cargo bay straight, no decoration. The complaint, the hold, the 72 hours, the 3 ships outside. Sig listened with his arms crossed and his face doing nothing. Dara listened with her arms crossed and her face doing the calculation Marcus had already done. Kethvar listened, and then said, in his precise and careful way, I am not a human, and I understand this is a human matter, but I would like to note that I find the Keth Dominion's position on this subject to be very poor, and I would like to remain on the crew, if that is acceptable. Nobody said anything for a moment. It's acceptable, Marcus said. He looked at the 3 of them. I'm taking her out tomorrow morning, he said. Test flight, registered and filed, within the station's approach corridor. Everything legal, everything clean. I'm not asking anyone to be here for that if they don't want to be. Sig uncrossed his arms. What time? He said. 0700. I'll make coffee, Sig said. The station's public feed glitch happened at 0652. Marcus never found out exactly how it happened. The station systems administrator later described it as an access anomaly in the external docking observation relay, which was a technical way of saying that the camera system covering Bay 7's external hull and the approach corridor below sublevel 9 had connected itself to the public channel for approximately 47 minutes, starting just before the ardent choir left her berth. Dr. Park, when asked later, said she had nothing to do with it. Her voice when she said it did a thing that suggested the question did not require an answer. At 0701, the ardent choir undocked from Bay 7, under her own power for the first time in 40 years. She moved slow. Marcus was careful. Dara was on systems. Sig was watching the reactor, and none of them were in a hurry. And she moved clean, the old drives pushing steady and even. No vibration in the deck plates, no warning lights. Just a 200-year-old human warship coming back out of the dark on her own terms. The public feed, which was currently watching, showed her leaving the berth. On Verat Station, people stopped what they were doing. The feed was public. It ran on every screen in the station's common areas, every commercial space, every commissary and trading floor and waiting bay, and at 0701 on a Wednesday morning, the people of Verat Station, human and otherwise, watched a ship that was supposed to be scrap metal emerge from sub-level 9 under blue-white running lights in the particular clean silhouette of fracture-era human construction and begin her approach to the station's outer corridor. The 3 Keth vessels activated their suppression field at 0708. Standard protocol, a broad-spectrum drive suppression field, the kind used in diplomatic enforcement situations, the kind that shut down modern drive systems and forced vessels to hold position pending compliance. And it swept across the approach corridor in a clean, expanding ring, the way it always did, the way it had worked reliably for 150 years of coalition politics. The ardent choir flew through it. She did not slow, she did not shudder. The old reactor, the stupid, inefficient 200-year-old reactor that burned fuel at a rate that made modern engineers uncomfortable, did not care about the suppression field, because the suppression field worked on drive system architectures that had not existed yet when the ardent choir was built, and the people who built her had not built her for anything easy, and the field passed over her hull and found nothing to catch, and moved on. She kept flying. She crossed the approach corridor at steady speed, and came to rest in the space between the 3 Keth vessels and the station, and she held position there, unhurried, running her lights, 200 years old, and exactly where she chose to be. On the station's public feed, the camera held the shot. Marcus opened one channel, not to the Keth ships, not to the coalition, to the public feed, because Dr. Park had asked him to, in case things went wrong, and someone should see it and know what it was. He was on screen. He was sitting in the captain's chair. He was holding a chipped ceramic mug. He did not make a speech, because there was no speech, because the ship had already said everything by being exactly where it was, and exactly what she was. Where she was, because a thing that the math said could not exist, had refused to stop existing, and that was the whole story, and it did not need narration. He just sat there, in front of the 3 Keth vessels, in the ship that had held their fleet for 11 hours, with a 4% survival probability, and had come out the other side, and had been buried for it, and had not finished yet. He sat there for 47 minutes. The Keth attaché filed the formal withdrawal of the coalition complaint at 0858. No reason given. HR. Marcus filed the ardent choir's new operating registration that afternoon, sitting at the impound office desk, with the form on his screen, and the mug in the cabinet above the captain's console, where it lived now. The form asked for vessel purpose, one of 6 standardized categories: commercial, research, private transport, salvage, military reserve, diplomatic auxiliary. He looked at the list. He selected salvage. He was still in the salvage business. He had just upgraded his primary vessel considerably. He submitted the registration, and leaned back in his chair and thought about the Harwick contract, which he had still not taken, and the debt column, which had not improved, and the coolant manifolds he had forgotten to bid on, and the 9 years of moving through auction houses, buying broken things, and fixing what could be fixed. The ardent choir was not his problem. She had never been his problem. She was the most expensive and irrational and completely unavoidable thing he had ever done, and she was going to cost him money for years. and Dara had already sent him a parts estimate for the secondary hull maintenance cycle that he was not going to look at until tomorrow. He sat in the impound office on sub-level 9 of Verrett's station and thought about a wooden box on a top shelf that was not for touching. He thought about an old man's voice, saying, "That ship held the line, Marcus." Fine, he thought. Fine, fine, fine. He called Dara and told her they were taking the Harwick contract. He had a ship to run.